no matter how much I think about it, no matter how much I wish for it, I can't go back in time and change the choices that I made, but I can potentially change someone else's future. I know that eating disorders are so complicated and that maybe them hearing my message won't do anything to change their path, but I like to think that it could for even a few people, because if I could have seen this messaging, maybe I wouldn't have done that, or maybe I would have at least stopped to question it or ask questions of some sort of medical professional and would have changed what I did.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Rachel. Guys, today's guest is such an incredibly accomplished athlete. Allie Ostrander has done pretty much everything you can do in the world of distance running. She is about to be inducted into the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame. She's a Boise State Athletics Hall of Fame member. She is an All-American. I am so impressed by her story and her running career, but even more inspired by her messaging. So we just want to welcome Allie to the show and thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm excited to come on.
Yeah, Allie, I'm really excited to just share your story, not only from an athletic perspective, but just from a woman and human perspective of just athletes in sports and just how women are particularly affected by a lot of this messaging, and especially growing up, how that has really changed over time for you and how you've kind of come full circle with how you're looking at, eating disorders, athletic career, all of it coming together. So can you tell us a little bit about your background growing up and how you found the love for running?
Yeah, so I grew up in Alaska and really loved growing up there. I also am like this weird cross between millennial and Gen Z, where like my childhood was mostly without like technology, social media, but then I did get social media when I was in high school. So I feel like I experienced both. And yeah, it's just kind of like a unique situation to be in. But I loved Alaska. It's like beautiful, and I feel like most of the people there are very into experiencing the outdoors in some way, like whether that's fishing or camping or hiking or running or skiing. And my family was definitely more into like the running and hiking. Neither of my parents ran in college, but they were both in like a run club when I was growing up. So I saw them running all the time. And my sister, who's 2.5 years older than me, started doing like cross country and track, and I looked up to her so much. So obviously, I just like followed along, started doing cross country and track as well. And that's just kind of how I fell into it. I just kept doing it. And I also was doing like soccer and basketball and skiing at the time, but running was what I was the most naturally good at, what I enjoyed the most, and also what I felt like attracted the same sorts of people as me. Like I got along with the other runners the most and had like the strongest friend group there as well. So I really enjoyed that and ended up kind of just eventually drifting towards that over the other sports and decided to pursue that in college.
Yeah, I think that a lot of women will sort of agree with you with um, the group, the family that kind of runners make. It's a very unique sport in that it is not a team sport, but runners feel so close with other runners. It's just like the secret club that, like, you only get if you're a runner. And I don't know anything about that because do not run like the wind. But so I just want to, are we running in Alaska
Oh, yeah. So
all year?
I ran obviously like in the winter, I played basketball or skied. But yeah, in the summer, fall, and then usually spring as well, I would run. Actually, I didn't always run in the summer. Sometimes I just played soccer, but Alaska is definitely like a runnable place. And now, like when I visit during Christmas break and stuff, I will run outside, and you have to put these like little like snow cleats on the bottom of your shoes, But other than that, like just getting traction, they clear like bike paths and roads and stuff. So you can always run outside unless, of course, there's like an ice storm or it just gets like way too cold. It's definitely more runnable than people think, though.
Okay, because I'm like, I mean, running's hard enough, and then now we're gonna run in Alaska. That's what we're gonna do. Okay, all right, girl. So looking back, when did you first start restricting your eating as a means to improve your running performance?
Ironically, it was actually before I was even like all in on running because I would say I went all in for running, like started running in the summers outside of the season, like after my sophomore year of high school. So when I was 16, I think around there, maybe that's 15. I'm losing track of the years at this point. But that's when I was like, okay, I think I want to pursue running. I think this is what I want to do in college. But I actually like started restricting so much younger than that. Because I remember when I was in like fifth or sixth grade, I started hearing people like I would be at track meets, you know, and I started hearing people talking about how these girls in eighth grade had like slowed down because they hit puberty and it was just like bad for their running. And now they were running with all this extra weight and all of this stuff. And that like terrified me because even though I wasn't all in on running, I was super, super competitive and not just with other people, but also with myself. So I always wanted to be improving and on this upward trajectory and also like beating everyone around me. So I thought, oh, well, I can't let that happen to me. I need to be in control of my body, be in control of my performance, and make sure that I'm setting myself up for success. And at the time, I didn't realize like how many risks came with that. Like besides just the mental health piece, there's all the physical repercussions with reduced bone density and hair loss and getting sick and getting injured and like also just having so many limitations on your life around that. And so I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. I also didn't realize that, like, yes, maybe it takes time to adjust to your body after you go through puberty, and that it can be a hard transition for female athletes. But it also is what ultimately sets you up for long term success and the ability to reach your full potential. Because what I did was basically I tried to bypass that step. Like, okay, I'm not going to go through puberty. I'm just going to like stay at this size forever and then continue to like get better at running, but eventually that runs out because your body isn't naturally supposed to stay that size. And so you don't build as much muscle mass, you don't build bone mass, and that ultimately limits you when you are trying to get to a really high level. All of a sudden, like you don't have the strength or power that you need, you don't have the durability that you need to train. And so it's actually hugely limiting, which is something that I just didn't realize at all. So, besides just being really bad for your health, it's also bad for your athletic career, which is ironic because that's like why I started going down that road in the first place.
This is such an interesting this is such an interesting perspective that you bring up in the sports aspect when it comes to the differences between men and women once we start to hit puberty and once we start to get the ideas of like our bodies changing, we get stronger. From a societal perspective, we continuously encourage that with men. Men get older, they get bigger, they get stronger, that's more desirable. For women, getting bigger and stronger and changing and get like moving in this direction is kind of not ideal. It's like stay as children as small as possible and delay the inevitable of aging, which is just like set up for failure. There's one thing that you are very certain of in this world is like every day you're going to get older. That's
Yeah.
like the only guarantee. Like there are so many things that happen in this world that are definitely not a guarantee, but a guarantee is that you're going to get older. And we spend so much time fighting against what is the next stage, what's the next thing ahead of us, trying to hold on to what's behind us as women a lot. And this is highlighted right now from an athletic perspective when it comes to men and women, because like, think about male athletes for a second. Like, there's no spot really for them where it's like, oh, getting bigger and stronger. Like, negative.
That's
Like,
unfortunate.
Yeah.
yeah, like, or more testosterone. You're going into, like, you're hitting puberty. You're going to have the ability to gain more muscle, and it's just like all fueled where like the same time frame for girls and young women is more of like, uh-oh, you have this kind of like gloom and doom hanging over you when it
Mhm.
comes to both of those. So it's just like it's prevalent in sports, but it's also just like from a societal perspective, so um such a highlight for the differences in our messaging and how we want to delay this almost inevitable. And you've talked a lot about, the differences between male and female bodies as they mature as athletes. But how many girls need to take a step back in order to leap forward athletically? And the pressure that a girl shows during that process, like your talent was fake. It was just there while you were lucky enough to be a child and be small, and it's eventually going to go away. Now, can you explain like kind of what you mean by this? And you talked a lot about it on your YouTube documentary, which I loved. But can you dive into this a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah. So basically, like, kind of the idea that I'm getting at is that for male athletes, puberty is hugely positive. Like, in almost every sport across the board, you have higher testosterone, you gain muscle, you gain endurance, your VO2 max goes up. You're just going to get better in a very linear fashion. Whereas for women, like, you hit puberty, more estrogen, you'll probably gain some body fat, your hips will get wider. You'll also gain muscle mass. Your testosterone will also go up, but it's not nearly as linear as for men. So, for women, the entire process looks a little bit more murky, a little bit more complicated, as with almost everything in life. Like, it's just so unfair. I don't get it. But, anyways, that can be really stressful for young female athletes, especially when sports matter so much to you. Like, just because we're women doesn't mean sports matter any less to us. We're also looking to hopefully get scholarships to college, be able to pursue this at another level. And so we want to be able to have that linear progression, impress college scouts, impress coaches, get scholarships. And it's just not healthy to try to limit your body in that way and have so much control over it at a young age. But there's obviously so many little pieces that make that very tempting to do. And for me, I got so much background noise from spectators, from reporters, from fans, from like everyone that was just saying, like, oh, you're good now, but like once you hit puberty, you'll slow down, or oh, don't eat too much, or you won't be able to run as fast next year, that sort of stuff. And not only is that just incredibly unhelpful, it's also untrue. But when you're young, you don't realize that. I didn't have the knowledge about any of that. So I just kind of took in all these little scraps of information and assumed that they were fact. And it's just it it really, I'm so upset now that I did that because I set myself back so much with not allowing myself a couple years to grow and change and adapt to then eventually jump forward. I thought that it meant if you ever slow down, if you ever don't have a year where you're getting better each time, that means that your talent isn't real. It was just from being prepubescent and it'll never come back, which is like saying that out loud sounds crazy, but at the time, like, it was just something that I fully believed. And I think so many other people believe that too. And so many girls also end up quitting sports because they don't allow that adjustment period to happen, or they go into that adjustment period, feel self conscious because it's really hard, and they might be slower for a bit or might struggle in their sport for a bit, and then just don't continue through because they think it's over for them. And there just needs to be so much more information and research around female athletes and going through puberty and how important it is, and also what that process looks like. Because I think for me, I didn't know what was coming. It felt very scary, very unknown, very uncertain. And, as like a type A person, I want things to be certain. I want to be able to know what to expect. And there should be like way more clear guidelines for athletes of like how to navigate this period, like what should you expect, and also different expectations from college coaches on what to see from high school athletes and how, if they do get slower 1 year, that's not a red flag. Maybe that's actually a green flag because it means that their body is growing and maturing appropriately and they'll be able to really progress and train well in college.
Brief interruption for love it or hate it.
I love it and hate it. Can I be both?
You can definitely be both because it changes day to day. Nobody loves their partner every day.
So true. So true. I'm gonna let him know. He can know how I'm feeling about him based on which one of the leggings that I'm
Which
gonna wear.
pants you're wearing. You
Check
come
my
out.
pants. Pull my mood.
Just check my pants.
We've got an amazing Valentine's Day release, guys, coming this Friday. The Be Mine Go Away. I don't know which one's going to get more use. And our leopard hearts come out this Friday. It's going to be such a love filled day. So make sure that you get your Valentine's Day pants, however you're feeling.
However you're feeling. And I want to take bets. Which one do you think will be the highest seller? Be Mine, Go Away, or Leopard Hearts? I don't
Go
know.
away. It's so, so important for people to hear, but you're right that that is not currently the messaging, and it's not the messaging that you received. And that was so harmful to potentially your entire running career. And you talked a little bit about, the voices coming from outside. Obviously it's confusing enough being a young girl, not knowing. Now, like, your eating disorder affected your ability to have a period. It affected your ability for bone density. There were several injuries that you suffered, you reportedly as a result potentially of your eating disorder. But I want to talk about those outside voices for a second, because as your running fame sort of increased and you became bigger in the running world, commentators started to comment on you, but really on your looks and body.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to, there was an ESPN commentator that called you the baby faced assassin. And one commentator said that you looked like you still played with Barbies. I wanted to hear directly from you how it felt being the reigning national champion and having people who were reporting on you in your sport focus so much on what you looked like, what your body looked like, and your just general appearance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's frustrating. It's also something that I think I became so numb to because it started from a very young age. I remember being a freshman in high school and a reporter after the race asking me like what my weight was because they wanted to report on that. They thought, "Oh my gosh, she's so small. Like we need to highlight that as like what's impressive about her." And that kind of continued like all through high school, all through college. I feel like it was always a main talking point, which obviously didn't help to like get rid of those ideas and thoughts in my head that my size was what made me successful. But then in college, I think that like my last couple years, I just got so fed up with it because I was like, look, I have accomplished a lot in this sport. And the most interesting thing you have to say is that I have a baby face or I look young or literally my last ever collegiate race. I remember the commentators over the loudspeakers, the whole stadium announcing my height and my weight, which like they didn't even know. They were just like guessing or got it off of Wikipedia or something, which is like not accurate at all. But I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, this doesn't happen to male athletes. This isn't like, why are these people so vastly unprepared that they could talk about literally so much else and they choose to only talk about my body and my appearance?
Yeah, honestly, I love the way that you said that of just being vastly unprepared because, like,
Seriously.
it kicks it back to, like, Do you have anything, like, did you prepare anything for, like, something that is of value to say? Because, like, with coming in with that many accomplishments and just continuously proving your athletic ability, and then all that you have to say is, like, you have a baby face and this is her weight, like, you should probably do some research.
How dare
Yeah, well,
you?
it's just like to me that's like, okay, you literally didn't research these athletes, so you're just profiling us. Like and I've seen it happen to other people too. It's not like it's a me issue. Like there was this one race where there were these two pacers and the commentators like only talked about like, "Oh, you can tell they're just pacing this race because their bodies are different from everyone else's." Like you know that they're not really in the race. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, not everyone is going to look exactly the same when they're in a race. And yeah, it's just crazy. Like it happens way too often.
I think this highlights too when it comes to female athletics, and you have said like this is this was a main point that they were talking about, but it really comes down to the fact that um when we look at when we look at athletes, the standard has been set for male athletes, and then it's just kind of like how close you can get to that. So that's why we don't take the time to say like when you hit puberty you might need to take a step back, your times might look a little slower in your like sophomore junior year, whatever it is that might be appropriate for athletic development, and knowing that female athletes peak later, statistically peak later, but men don't. So the whole idea that like you might slow before you get faster and that's a really good thing wasn't welcomed with open arms, because like, well, that's not what the men do. And it's like,
Mhm.
well, that's because these are women. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
simple
Well,
answer to
that's the thing,
that.
and like still like so much research on training for pretty much every sport across the
Every
board
sport.
is based on male athletes. And I get why, like it's so much simpler to research male athletes. They have a 24-hour hormone cycle. Like
Yeah.
that does make them very simple beings. But like women are much more complicated.
Literally.
Yeah. Women are so much more complicated. We have so much more going on, and we still deserve to be understood. We still deserve to have research studies and know what is going to be best for our athletic development. So I think that science will eventually catch up, but it's very frustrating how far it lags behind.
In how we can maximize our athletic development. We're only kind of scratching the surface now. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. Rachel and I have talked about it a lot with, fitness and weightlifting, and just like how some of these,
Mhm.
the general conversation has just been based on a male athlete. But that goes across the board, because we're not looking to maximize our athletic potential as a female athlete. We're looking to maximize the female, or maximize our athletic potential as a male athlete. And it's like, no, our bodies are different. That's something to be celebrated and explored. And also that we can work with our hormone changes, our menstrual cycles, not to just delay your menstrual cycle. I think that, you've talked about, as a means to just stay the same, keep your hormone changes the same, like just delay the inevitable instead of working with our bodies. And that's, I mean, we talk a lot about weight loss being problematic in our society on the podcast, and just like how we are consistently working against our bodies in order to just structure them in a way that like we seem to be aesthetically pleasing, or in a way to go back to some like high school weight, or like these are crazy standards where it's like, that's not your body now, that's not your hormones now, that's not is completely irrelevant to the body that you're working with now. And if we continue to go down the path of fighting our bodies in an effort to change them, we're just going to keep losing the fight. It's
Yeah.
not a winning battle.
Yeah, no. And it's also like there are so many times where there's this idea of like, oh, you need to look like this body to be good at this sport, like fill in the
Yes.
blank, whatever sport it is. There's an idea of what the ideal body is. And it's so backwards. People pursue a body instead of pursuing excellence in the sport. And they think that by pursuing that body, that's the same as pursuing excellence. But it's really like, no, like train well, train with a lot of expertise and understand what the demands of the sport are, fuel yourself appropriately, and your body will naturally become like exactly what it needs to be for what you're training for, that your body is smart enough to do that. But but people just shoot for a body, and then instead of like training and letting their body become what it needs to be. And I totally understand that because that's what I did. But it's also like, why would we expect that every single person's body is going to look the same for the sport? Like, obviously, there's going to be stereotypes and an idea of what the body for a sport looks like, but it's not going to be the same for everyone. And we shouldn't expect it to be.
And that's only been created by one person one time who played the sport. That ends up being the standard. You know what I mean? Like, one person looked like this, was athletically accomplished in this sport, and then all of a sudden that becomes the standard. I mean, we do that in life, right? We're like, if you're a good
Yeah.
mom, you do it this way. And then you're like, wait, there's so many other ways to do that. There's no blueprint for life. I want to talk a little bit about you becoming the most decorated Div.1 runner, one of the most decorated Div.1 runners in the NCAAs, winning consecutive NCAA titles in the 3,000 meter, 13-time All-American, 8-time Mountain West champion. You were named Mountain West Conference All-Sport Female Athlete of the Year 3 consecutive years. You're incredible. In 2021, you ran a PR in the Olympic trials. That same year, you were hospitalized for an eating disorder. Can you take us back to that time and what made you finally decide that you needed some professional help?
Yeah. So, as I said, I feel like my eating disorder started when I was in fifth or sixth grade, and it kind of ebbed and flowed. Like anyone that's experienced an eating disorder probably knows, like, one reason I never like say what my official diagnosis was is because I feel like a diagnosis just doesn't really fit an eating disorder because your eating disorder changes and evolves depending where you are in your life. It often can go from restricting to binging to, exercise behaviors back to restriction. It's always changing and evolving. And I feel like during college, I started seeing a dietitian, started going to therapy, and like I wasn't recovered by any means, but I feel like I was kind of in like a stable spot. And then when I went professional, I continued on in that spot for the most part. But then COVID hit, and that was in 2020. The Olympics were postponed, and and for athletes, that was like usually you're like constantly in a training cycle. And when the Olympics were postponed, I swear like 50% of professional runners got surgery of some type because everyone's just like always injured and waiting for like the off season. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, I did this, I did this. Like I'm healing this. I was in the same boat. My Achilles had been injured for about a year, but it was like runnable. So I just was running through it. So at that point, I got something called PRP, which is protein rich plasma, injected into my Achilles, which meant I had to take 6 weeks off running. And I could still like cross train and stuff. And due to it being COVID, I had so much time on my hands and I really went down a road of exercise addiction. I just started biking so much every single day and like really restricting what I was eating. And during a time that felt very uncertain, during a time where I couldn't run, which is one of my like favorite things to do, biking and exercise addiction and restriction really made me feel in control, made me feel good. And even though it was at the same time like very bad for me, it I just couldn't seem to stop. Like I guess COVID and injury at the same time was a huge trigger for me, and it really caused me to backslide in my eating disorder. And so, anyways, after I recovered, started running again. Um, I got injured very quickly because my body was just so weak from how I had been treating it. And at that point, the doctors were like very concerned. They were like, "Look, your blood work is horrible, your DEX is horrible, like all of this stuff. You really need to like address this problem." So at that point, I started working with a dietitian again. But unfortunately, I had just done a lot of damage during that period. And after that, I just started getting injury after injury. So I think I got 3 bone injuries within like 6 months. And this is leading into an Olympic year. And so at that point, my sponsor Brooks was like, look, we can't allow you to race and train unless you actually address this. So you're either going to have to go to like a partial hospitalization program, or you'll just have to leave the team. And I only ever had an eating disorder for running related reasons. So I was like, obviously, I'm going to go to treatment then, because I want to be able to keep running. Like, there's no other reason for me to do this. And so that's when I went to treatment. And that was about 7 or 8 weeks before the Olympic trials, I was admitted, and the condition of it was that I would still be able to train during this. Obviously, like my dietitian knew what my training was and adjusted my diet plan for that. But it was a unique situation of usually when you're admitted to a partial hospitalization program, you aren't exercising. Um, so that was unique for me, but I continued training, and every few weeks I would go for like a weekend and do a race. And then eventually it was the Olympic trials. Right before the Olympic trials, I decided to speak publicly about my story with my eating disorder and just be open about all of that. When I had been in treatment, I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't like I wasn't talking about it online. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm pretty active on Instagram, and both of them I was just kind of like pretending everything was normal, and it felt really wrong and backwards to me. Like, one of my highest values is authenticity, and I just felt very inauthentic not being open about that, which that's not saying like if you have this sort of struggle you need to be open. It's just what felt right to me. So I decided to speak about it. I made a post on Instagram and YouTube talking about it, and I think that that really like helped me to not only like feel authentic and feel good, but also to hold me accountable, because now like I was very open about it. I felt like, okay, now I've told people this is going on. I need to stick with it. I need to be true to myself and really like carry this through. So at the Olympic trials, I ran a PR. I got eighth, and I was really happy with that. But then right afterwards, I got one of the worst injuries of my life, which was a femoral neck stress fracture, and I had to take 4 months off running. And that was like probably the hardest time, because I had just been released from the partial hospitalization and I was trying to stay consistent with it. But I was also injured, which is always a big trigger for me. And I was like, what's the point? Like, I'm still getting these injuries. I thought I was making so many positive changes. My body's still weak. But I stuck with it. And over the last like it's been 3.5 years now since I was released, and I honestly feel like just in the last 6 months I've felt like my body is finally stronger, more durable, able to take more training and racing. Like, this year I've been racing from January until now, and so far I haven't gotten injured, knock on wood. That has not happened in so long. Every other year, after about like 3 or 4 races, I would get injured. So I'm really excited by that. And I think like it also just speaks to how much time it takes for your body to recover from damage. Like, I literally on and off for 12 years was like restricting or over exercising, and like really not giving my body what it needed to recover, rebuild, to grow strength, to build bone. So obviously, it's not going to fix itself in like 10 weeks the way I wanted it to. But yeah, so it took a long time, but I think I'm finally starting to see some of the positive benefits. And like this summer, I ran a new PR in the steeplechase at the Olympic trials, got seventh. So it's like I actually am seeing progress. I'm finally proving to myself that like my talent wasn't fake, you know. In fact, it was real. So like that's very exciting, but it is just such a long and hard process, and I think I'm still in it. Like, as much as I want to say I'm done, I think I'm still in that, and I'm still like trying to make conscious decisions every day that are the best for my body. But it's hard. It's definitely hard, because there's still so much messaging in the sport, in the media, that lead me to believe that if there's a problem, it's because of the way my body looks. Like, that will be how to fix it. um, and that it's hard to ignore that all the time.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. But you got to know, we are able to bring you this incredible content each week and talk to you about all of the pressing matters in health and fitness because of our successful TTSL workout program.
We have incredible coaches, movement demos, and just different cycles all the time. So we take the thinking out of your training every day.
If you would like to join us, please go to ttsldaily.com and pick out your package. You are going to love every day of fitness. It's such a great testimony to, the patience that's needed whenever anyone makes a change. And it's so hard. I think every woman can relate to this of, maybe going down a journey with diet culture and having, messaging of all cardio and how to, sculpt your body to look a certain way and all of those years of that. And then trying to come to a new understanding with your body and how it does come with tons of backsliding, how it comes with maybe this isn't working. I don't feel like I'm performing better. I don't feel like it's just I hear you that you questioned the process and that you stuck with it is just something that I think is really going to resonate with people that hear it because it's not an immediate thing, but it's so worth it. And I wanted to ask you if you ever think about you having fueled yourself the whole entire way since fifth or sixth grade, what kind of runner you might have been if you ever sit with that and think about it. And if it fuels you to, maybe change things for the next generation of runners that are coming up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that haunts me because there were so many years where I didn't fuel myself. And also because of how long I participated in those behaviors and allowed those thoughts to rule my mind, it was so ingrained, literally rewired my brain to believe all of that stuff that I lived for those years. And 12 years of that makes it so difficult to come out of that. And I just wish, like, literally any point along the way, I had made a change. And even if maybe for like a year or two when I was younger, I had struggled, but like had been able to stop and like, switch off that part of my brain and start really listening to my body. Like, I wish I had done that at any point. Um, and that is a huge part of like why I'm so open online about my recovery and about how important fueling your body is, because I know that no matter how much I think about it, no matter how much I wish for it, I can't go back in time and change the choices that I made, but I can potentially change someone else's future. So, can't change my past, but maybe someone else won't go down the same road I did because they heard what I said about it. And like, I know that eating disorders are so complicated and that maybe them hearing my message won't do anything to change their path, but I like to think that it could for even a few people, because if I could have seen this messaging, maybe I wouldn't have done that. Or maybe I would have at least stopped to question it or ask questions of some sort of medical professional and would have changed what I did. Because I truly believe that I would be so much better of a runner if I had always fueled myself. And I think it would be so much easier to do every day instead of having to think about every single decision. So, yeah, like hopefully I can make a difference.
Oh, I can just reassure you, you are making a difference. There's so much noise and so much language in the other direction that the more we can start to talk about the nuances of the eating disorders, just like how to train as a woman, just inserting some new language on how we talk about our bodies, how we fuel our bodies, and not in this like caloric restrictive, controlling what they look like. And you said something really important there about eating disorders. And I think some of the ideas that we're, even when we're presented with the idea of an eating disorder, somehow we think that when we're done, like it's over. Oh, I've recovered from, and it's like, no, eating disorders are one of those things, like, you have to continue to eat on a daily basis. You have to continue to fuel your body on a daily basis. So like, it's not, sometimes when we think about other addictive behaviors or something that we're trying, you can just cut them out and you can avoid that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same with an eating disorder. It has ebbs and flows. It has so many different aspects of your life. It looks different in so many ways, where like it might be restrictive, it might be over exercising, it might be binging. And it's like very difficult to kind of put ourselves in a box of like, well, which eating disorder did you have? And it's like, well, they were really coming and going, and it continues to be a struggle because every day you have to wake up and make some of those decisions and decide, how to navigate this world, with how to feel appropriately and how to kind of talk to your body, even when you have all of these like side messagings coming in all the time, trying to drag you back into old behaviors and old thought processes.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, like, I started sharing when I was literally actively in treatment, because I felt like I only ever heard these messages from people that had come out the other side, who were now successful, who had done it, who said they were recovered and they were running the fastest of their lives. And I was like, look, I'm so happy to see that and to have those examples, but it's just not relatable, because I'm like, okay, I can see you on the other side. I still don't believe that that can happen for me, because I haven't seen all the in between stages. And so that's why I immediately wanted to like share and actively show every step, because it is so up and down. It is not a linear path, it's more of a roller coaster. And I wanted to be able to be that person that like showed the behind the scenes and like showed what actually happened. Because when I started sharing about it, there was no guarantee I would ever PR again. There's no guarantee I would continue running professionally. And like, I'm really happy that it has worked out for me, but I didn't know that that would happen. And I think like I'm still finding out what my potential is. And I'm glad that I've shared all the steps along the way, because that to me is like it, it's just what I feel like I would have wanted to see, because I want to be able to see like, okay, like this is kind of how it went, and like, okay, like it was up and down, injuries here and there. Like it's more real, instead of just like, oh my gosh, look at this. Like I feel like so many of the recovery accounts I see online are like, I started eating and my life is so perfect now. Like it's wonderful. I'm so happy. It's like daisies and butterflies. And I'm like, that's just not how it works. I mean, maybe it is for some people and I'm so happy for them. But for me, it was like, no, I started eating again. I like really struggle to like believe that I deserve this food, that I need this, and this is hard. And now I got injured and I'm really sad and I don't want to eat right now, but I have to. And like, but anyways, like it's just like a constantly undulating process. It's going to be different for everyone, and I just wanted to be able to show that, and also like put it out there when I didn't know what the outcome was, because I think that's like really powerful.
So true. And so much more effective than the before and afters, which sometimes just feel like you're
But
missing the whole
how?
story.
Yeah.
But how? That's lovely, and I'm here for it, and I want to be that after, but how? How did you get there? And thank you for being so open to share your how, because although that's not going to be how it's going to look for everyone, it's just that reinforcement that it isn't going to be linear, and that you don't just wake up one day on the other side with the butterflies flying around you, and that's normal. And so I just want to thank you for sharing and being so brave and honest, because that's really the hardest part. I'm wondering if running now sort of feels a little bit like redemption for you. Like, what does it feel like to be able to love your sport without all of that in the background?
Yeah, I definitely think it feels really beautiful. I think one of the things is like I've gotten inducted into the Boise State Hall of Fame, the Alaska State Hall of Fame, and like it's really cool to get those honors, and I'm so proud of what I achieved, and I know I worked really hard for it, but at the same time, like I'm not necessarily proud of the means I went to get those results, and I wish that I had gone about it in a healthier way, in a way that was a better example for young athletes in the sport. And so it's really wonderful now to be able to step to the starting line and know that I'm doing things the right way, in a way that I would recommend to other people, in a way that I would want young athletes to see. And so that to me is like the most different thing now, is that like I'm so proud of the way I'm getting these results. And I'm just really happy that like I am standing on these starting lines, like really proud of how I got there. Like obviously I want the result of the race to also be really good, but I know that like the way I am achieving whatever result I get is something that I would want the younger generation to see and want them to know about. So that makes me really happy.
Yeah. Well, honestly, thank you so much for sharing your story, not only here with us, but throughout your journey, because that can just be really difficult when you're going through something so personal and so um, difficult. And to say, like, okay, I know this can be helpful for others. I'm not even sure where it's going. I'm not sure how to navigate it, but I am going to be brave enough to share it. And that's just so important. So I want to, thank you for being able to share some of that journey. You are incredible. And I want to let our listeners know where they can hear more from you, see more from you, and follow along with the rest of your journey.
Yeah, so I'm mainly on YouTube and Instagram. Just on Instagram, Allie_Ostrander, and on YouTube, just Allie Ostrander. I'm also on TikTok, but like honestly, like I said, I'm a weird mix of millennial and Gen Z, so I don't really do TikTok. Um, got on too late and don't understand it. Um,
I get that.
but yeah, so if you want to follow along, Instagram and YouTube are probably the best place.
That's perfect. I'm definitely going to follow along. I can't wait to see what you do next, but also have really loved like learning about your story and how far you've come, and so excited for your future.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm sorry. Like probably the people listening don't know, but man, it's been a mess on my end. Thank you for dealing with that, and I really appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie.